Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and on this occasion I am joined by Euan Taylor.
Hello, Craig.
And we are here to kind of put a wrapper, a bow, on the 2023-24 Scottish football season, which, well, this has been released in late June. Obviously, you know why, because this campaign went on a bit longer than most seasons because Scotland were playing at the European Championships. Not playing very well, it must be said, and we'll get to that on the podcast. But this, for the audience listening on Spotify, watching on YouTube, there will still be other stuff coming out, but this will be the last kind of normal, kind of topical show we'll do on either of those platforms. There will be kind of other kind of topical stuff around signings that will be coming out next week on the Patreon. And then that'll kind of be a bit more kind of more kind of content that we've created that's a bit more kind of evergreen as I take a holiday as we then gear up for the start of the new campaign. But there will still be other stuff going up on the main feed. There'll still be stuff going up on YouTube, and there still will be stuff going on Patreon. So you don't have to miss out. But in terms of just kind of having a finale on all the stuff we've been doing over the course of the season, so obviously we've done stuff at the Euros as well with just a number of podcasts there and videos. And I did say the last time when I'd done the episode with Tony that we would talk about the game against Hungary, but we wouldn't talk about the wider implications in terms of Steve Clarke standing with the Scotland fans and the kind of his job in general. And so I've brought in Euan to help me discuss that, because I think it's fair to say of everybody in the Terrace podcast, Euan is the most who is... Some of you feel like Euan, actually. Are you fully Clarke out, or are you just saying that there should be a lot more questions asked than there is being at this current time about the Scotland national team boss?
Well, yeah, both.
So you are Clarke out.
I do want Clarke out, yeah. But I don't, it's not going to happen. And part of the reason it's not going to happen is the second element of your question there, because there's no one's talking about it. apart from, if fans are talking about it, I've seen people speaking about it. There's not been any discussion of it in the media that I've seen whatsoever. It's all broad brush strokes. Oh, there's not enough kids playing football in the street type stuff that we...
I saw a lot of no ball game signs after we got beaten by Hungary.
Yeah, all of those. And I was like, I don't think those things are related, really. And we're probably as soon as Sports Sounds back on air, we will talk about the reserve league. I'm sure that with that kind of stuff that gets mentioned without looking at the actual. We sent a pretty good selection of players to an international tournament for the second time in the last 3 years, and yet again the same manager has not arranged those players very well whatsoever. And I would argue actually has arranged them the worst of any manager at that tournament for the second tournament in a row. And on this occasion, we are the worst team out of 24 at the tournament. That to me begs scrutiny as to why would we continue with a manager that has served that up twice now. Now, there's obviously our counter arguments, and I'm sure you'll raise those.
Yeah, I will make them. I'm still very much in the Clarke in camp, so I will raise those. So I should probably start taking notes of what you're saying right now, so I can argue back at them.
You rebut them, but it's the fact that it's the same or very similar mistakes that Clarke has made repeatedly that has led me to think that Clarke should go. I think there's also, just in a broader sense, there's like a shelf life to managers, I think. Steve Clarke's been the manager for 5 years now. Obviously, those have been 5 good years, really, for the national team overall. Are we in a better place than we were when Steve Clarke took over? Yes. Is that solely down to Steve Clarke? No. I don't think that. I think you couldn't really argue that. The squad is better than it was when Steve Clarke took over, and that's not just because of Steve Clarke by any stretch. The players are just better now than they were. There's a better selection available. So he has benefited from that. And I just think freshness is needed now. We've not played well for a long time under Steve Clarke. Now, we have gone through, in those 5 years that he's been manager, we have gone through long periods without playing well under Clarke. And then there have been like upticks, obviously, within that too. Some very significant upticks, probably the highest point of the Scottish national team since I've been following it has been under Clarke relatively recently. It was probably going into the Spain away game during the qualifiers is probably the best I've ever felt about the Scottish national team. However, since then, we have only beaten Gibraltar in however many games. And the same, as I say, the same mistakes are being made from 3 years ago in big games at a tournament. I think you can probably look at the qualification campaign just past, and it's maybe not quite as good as we thought it, or felt it was at the time, with the benefit of hindsight. Obviously, you feel like there's no point saying that at the time because I was enjoying it as much as everybody else was. But if we look back, like a lot of those games were a lot closer, or we were quite fortunate for various reasons in them, and there was sort of an unsustainable overperformance in those games, which reality kicked in, and some of the goals we scored were, it was almost everything that we hit went in during the qualification campaign. That stopped happening. And the fact that under Steve Clarke, we have absolutely no idea how to construct a chance. That has really come to bite us once we've got a major tournament where all the teams are at a certain level and aren't willing to play their second string, which is what we benefited from to a large degree in the qualification campaign. So yeah, those are various sort of scattergun points that sort of underline my feelings on Clarke.
Okay, time for the rebuttal. Time for the Clarke in camp. So I'm not the staunchest of Clarke defenders. Maybe it would have been more interesting if you'd had Craig Anderson on this podcast instead of myself.
Because he is.
Yeah. He is. With Steve Clarke and Greg Taylor. You'll never hear Craig Anderson say a bad word about either.
Yeah.
But I'm still very much, at this point in time, I'm very much Clarke in. Like, I've in the past, I have kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit and kind of thought, is he doing that good a job? I mean, I remember you talk about you mentioned previously the Israel game before we played Serbia, and you were probably right in that Serbia was probably our first really good performance under Clarke, and that obviously got us to the last Euros. But the game before that was the Israel match at Hampden, where it was dreadful. And I remember watching that game that night and kind of pulling my hair out, and I think it was like constantly on Twitter saying like, how is he not changing this? How is he sticking with this 3-4-3 that isn't working? Why is he persisting with this? Why is nothing changing? We've been awful from start to finish in this game, and we're kind of lucky to sneak through in penalties. So I wasn't a big Clarke fan then. I was also leaning towards, has he taken us as far as we could go after the poor Euros, and then kind of poor, we'd started the World Cup qualification before the Euros. It was a poor start, and then it got worse with the Denmark defeat, and then we were beaten by Moldova. And we had the kind of recovery after that. And then we lost to Ukraine, and then we lost to Ireland. It was when we lost to Ireland, I was like, okay, this might have just reached the end of a cycle, and it might be time to change things. And then Clarke brought it back again. And that is certainly one of the points that I want to argue with you about. Is, to be fair, you kind of brought it yourself when you said that we have had these periods of not playing well under Clarke, and there have been periods that have lasted a few games and they feel more sustained, I think, at international level, because, and as opposed to weeks going by between matches, months go by, and there's more time to kind of sit and fester in it all. But Clarke has consistently found ways of not making wholesale changes, but tinkering with things enough. Because we can't really make wholesale changes, can we? Like we don't have the depth of players or the variety of talent. Myself and Tony spoke about that. We've got too many of the similar type of players, so there's not. He's kind of tied in what he can do, but he has found little ways to do things. There was a period where the 3-4-3 wasn't working. He brought in Adams and Dykes to partner up front together. That started to have a bit more success. Then there was kind of changes where kind of Adams fell out of form, and there was some injury stuff, and then that was where the kind of McTominay and McGinn thing started together. There was the switch into the back four for the kind of trio Nations League games when Tierney was out.
Mm-hmm.
He has done little bits and pieces to bring it back, and I think he and this team are capable of doing it again. Now, you do make a good point about sometimes there is a shelf life, and that is something that I think would be the biggest concern for me going into the next campaign. Are the players just tired of the message? Has Clarke run out of ideas? Does it need freshened up? A problem with that is that I think it would be daft to get rid of him now. I think we need, and people say, oh, well, you do it would be too late. But if you do it now, and there is no, I mean, the SFA will have a better idea than anybody. I don't trust them to do the best work with whatever information they have at their disposal. But they'll have within the corridors, they'll have a better idea whether the players are getting sick of the message, aren't responding as much. There's maybe some grumbles about his management or whatever, kind of those things that you hear about a team that's starting to descend into the mire, basically. But I don't think we're getting anything. We're not hearing anything about that at the moment. And I think Clarke was certainly very poor at the Euros. And he essentially, the problems with the team, he kind of shut himself a bit and overcorrected it. Tried to give too much protection to a defence that ended up conceding 7 goals in 3 games anyway. When it's like, well, you may as well let off the reins a bit more and allowed us to create more chances because we weren't keeping any clean sheets regardless. And he certainly made a number of mistakes, but Clarke has shown the ability before to make those alterations to make us good again. And that's for me going forward. You could want to change the manager, and I think, and I know yourself, you're more. I'm not speaking to you when I say this, but I think a lot of fans are being a bit too emotional right now when they're saying get rid of Clarke. Because there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of anger, and with that, a lot in football and in life as well. Same with, like, if you look at like justice system and stuff, when people are angry and emotionally, like, really angry and hurt about things, you want vengeance, you want punishment. So people want Clarke. People want Clarke strung up, basically, because he failed us at this tournament and he needs punished for that. And the best way to do that is to fucking get rid of him, chuck him in the sea, get rid of Clarke. But is that going to make Scotland better going forward? Is that going to give us a better chance of qualifying for the World Cup? Is it going to give us a better chance of qualifying for the next Euros? I don't think so.
I first of all, from your point of, Clarke had shown that he can adapt and tweak things and stuff. Yes, he did do that. But then what happened when we got to a tournament? Reverted exactly back to what he did at the last tournament and fucked it. He played first game. Billy Gilmour is the best centre mid that we have. That was the case 3 years ago. It's definitely the case now. Drops him for the first game, which was ridiculous. And we then play very poorly in the first game and lose it. Obviously, the games panned out in different ways, but
it should be pointed out, though. It should be pointed out. I wanted Gilmour on the team, and that's the thing that I think he'll learn from now on. I think Gilmour will start pretty much every game.
Well, yeah, I could have told him that before we started.
But what I was going to say is that he wanted to put out a blueprint that worked for both games against Spain, and it even worked in the away game, because even like allowing even putting the disallowed goal to the side and saying, yeah, it was the right decision. Like, Adams had we had 2 very good chances late in that game when it was still only 1-0 to get a draw at that. And yeah, I know you say like it was a Spain B team, but it's still a very, very good team that we're playing. Hampden. Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. The Spain B team at Hampden. It's still a very good team. It's still a very good team that we were up against.
Is it? Do you know how many starters in that game even got in the squad for Spain for this tournament?
How many was it?
4. So only 4 of the starters even made the squad. Only one of them is actually a starter in Rodri, who was the best player in the park, at least Spanish player. So it was a proper B team. So the goalkeeper not in the squad, right back not in the squad, neither of the centre halves were in the squad, left back not in the squad. I think it was only Marino, Oyarzabal.
We are still talking about Spain, however.
Yeah,
maybe we shouldn't treat it as beating Spain like if we'd beaten Spain at this tournament, for instance. Maybe we shouldn't treat it like that.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty good.
It was a good result. I was there and I had a great time, but it was not like that result now does not look as good as it did then. And I looked at the team because Spain played Norway just before us in that same window. The team they played against Norway, who they beat 3-0, was much more similar to the team that sat this tournament. So for whatever reason, Del Fuente decided that he would just play the Rezzies against us at Hampden. I don't know why he did that, but it was to our benefit.
I knew you were going to kind of bring this up, and there's also the fact you could say like, right, I'm going to preempt what you're going to say. The Norway game, so we're rubbish for many minutes.
We were.
The Georgia game, the weather, and them going in a big huff. There's aspects that I often don't feel fully comfortable. I mean, I'll do it myself if it helps me win my own argument, but I often don't it often feels a bit kind of uncomfortable to me to kind of this rewriting kind of history kind of stuff because you can also apply it the other way. Like I can sit here and go, well, we actually got like quite an unlucky draw for the Euros as well because we played Germany in the opening game. The whole country's fired up for it. Germany actually started to look decent, whereas when the draw was made, they didn't look decent. And it was a kind of showpiece event where we kind of wilted under. But had we played Germany in our last game instead, like it looks like our Euro performance looks a lot worse compared to like some other countries. Like you look at Georgia, for instance, beating Portugal. I don't think Georgia are beating Portugal if Portugal haven't won their first two games. And the Swiss get a draw against Germany in their final game, which they probably don't get if Germany don't win their first two games. And so if we'd played Germany last, and I'm not saying this to try to defend Clarke. I'm just saying that when you start to use kind of language like this, you can go down many roads of kind of what ifs and what aboutery.
We played a Hungary team that was basically out and didn't beat them. In fact, got beat.
They didn't nearly make it through, did?
Yeah, but they didn't in the end.
But it's still like a result nearly got them through. It's not like they had nothing to play for.
No, they didn't have nothing to play for, but they played like they had nothing to play for most of the first half, and we just didn't do anything about it.
I don't know. I agree with what Tori said. I think they played it the right way. I think they played in a way that we weren't expected to play. We expected them to come at us, whereas they kind of thought the way they played it was Scotland's going to expect us this, so we're going to sit off them for a bit and kind of restrict them getting in front early, and then we're going to just try and win the game after that. And our chances of going through, we're not going to beat Scotland 4-0, but we could easily, we can beat them. So
I think they possibly might have if they had a go, but anyway, the way the turn went. But yeah, I mean, on that campaign, on the qualification, I mean, yes, look, you don't, there's game states and things come into it, but we scored 17 goals in that campaign. Our expected goals were just under 9. So we almost doubled. We almost scored twice as many goals as we should based on the chances. And if you remember, there were loads of breakers that we scored. Like McTominay, it was literally almost every shot that McTominay hit went in. And that gives you a sort of false sense of where, I think that gave us a false sense of where the team was, because that just doesn't continue to happen. Again, I think McTominay possibly only had one shot, maybe two in this whole tournament that just passed, and scored once. So maybe it is sustainable with McTominay. But generally speaking, we just don't create enough chances, and that's not really changing. And that's a long-standing thing with Clarke, other than when we played four at the back. And in those games, your Ukraine away game slightly differently, because also we were sort of playing for an 0-0 in that game. But in
we were very much the walking wounded in that one.
Yes, yeah. But the Ukraine at home in the Nations League, not the World Cup playoff, and the Ireland game at home, we actually played really well in those two games and made a lot of chances, and that was with playing a back four. Now, I can understand why he didn't want to do that from the start of the tournament, because I think ultimately, there was a lot of debate. I remember for that first Cyprus qualifier in the last qualification campaign, are we going to stick with the back four at that stage, or are we going to switch back to the back three? He said go with the back three, and then that was the case throughout the qualification campaign, really. And obviously it worked for the qualification campaign, but it ultimately probably was a mistake. And is Clarke going to change again now. I mean, you would hope that something he makes another tweak, but I'm not sure that there's as obvious a tweak to make now. I mean, after the last Euros, what was the obvious things were get Gilmore in the team, which she did, and get Stephen O'Donnell out of the team, which she did, because those were two sort of massive issues at the time. And Nathan Patterson, for all that he's become a boo boy since, Nathan Patterson was really good when he got a regular run in the Scotland team after the Euros. It's also fallen away a bit now, and Hickey's supplanted them. If Hickey ever comes back, by the way, the obvious change now would be, well, hopefully Hickey's fit, and then you're probably like, well, is Doak a guy that we can get in the first team? That feels early to me, even though I'm a big fan of Doak from what I've seen of him. I don't know if he's not playing enough.
As a potential change, not well. Yeah, let's go 4. That's one of them. Like, because we can't rely on Tierney. So if we're going to play the system that kind of is there to get the best out of him, we just can't rely on him to play that often for it to be basically our only type of way of playing, and that's the only kind of thing we work on. So 4 at the back, so that'd be a change. Do we not want a midfield? And this is a problem that we do have in terms of our depth, that we don't have a proper defensive midfielder. But if we don't have a proper defensive midfielder, then do we maybe just go to like a 4-1-4-1 type of system and have Gilmore sitting with McGinn and McTominay actually playing as number 8s as they do, and getting them kind of up and down, and you almost have the St Johnson. I remember the kind of old, I used to call it the lever, that St Johnson kind of 4 that would just kind of go front and just get a guys that could run all day long and just get them to go up and down. And then that makes up for the fact you don't really have any wingers. So you can just have Christie on one side and another strong runner on the other side, and you just have those guys. And then against tougher teams, you can drop McGinn back, because McGinn has played a bit of kind of defensive mid for... Yeah. McTominay has as well in his career. I don't think he's quite as good at it. So there is that potentially ways to change things?
Well, this is another problem, though. It's like, well, we don't have... People focus on we don't have a defensive midfielder. We don't have a creative midfielder. And
that's why I'm just saying, just make it all of it running. Run the ball into the back of the net. But to drag it back to the whole Clarke thing, though, this is what you're saying here is correct, and it's maybe you're actually maybe even like indirectly making a defence for Clarke here. Is that there is no easy answer out there, and that's the thing of like people saying like, let's get rid of Clarke. Okay, let's get rid of Clarke. Who are we bringing in? So David Moyes, if he wants the job, yes, I think we should. I think we should say to Clarke, okay, right, I think you've probably taken it as far as you can. We're going to get a guy who's a very similar kind of style to you in terms of aesthetics on the park, but a man who has got more experience of winning with that at a higher level. And so we're going to bring him in, and he's going to take us on, and that would be a very kind of clean, natural progression for this team, and should ensure some success going forward as well. However, I don't think David Moyes wants the job. Not at this point in his career. I think he would like it at some point, but I think he would like to wait a little bit more. I think he thinks he's got another English Premier League job in him, and he would also be very, very expensive at this point in his career. And if the SFA aren't prepared to give him the money that he would want to come in, then it's a moot point. So, so if we're not getting Derek McInnes, if we're not getting David Moyes, who are we getting? Derek McInnes? That kind of Freudian slip there from me.
Yeah.
He comes in. Derek McInnes is just a poorer version. I think Derek McInnes is a very good manager at Scottish Premiership level, but I just think Derek McInnes is just a poorer version of Steve Clarke. So the national team would not get any better. And if Scotland fans are sick of Clarke's negativity, McInnes would probably set up the team to attack more, but fans would be raging at the amount of times we drop points because McInnes takes off like 2 forwards and brings on a centre-half and a defensive midfielder for like the last 10 minutes of a game and just invites pressure.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are 2 more managers out there than 2, though. And it doesn't need to be someone Scottish.
I know that's true. But then if you are going further afield, and I was always a big fan of the idea of getting somebody like Bielsa in, because he's somebody that's got, not only has he got experience working with different national teams, but his style of play and that kind of constant pressing, I mean, that should be something that Scottish teams should be trying to do, because that is the kind of thing that we have. That's the kind of thing we're good at. We're good at kind of running and creating chaos. We're not so good at the whole football side of things.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
we can find somebody like that, but who is there? Who would want the job? It just seems like it seems like a very shallow pool of guys who would definitely be better than Steve Clarke, would play a way that would improve us, and would be so good that you would be negating the gamble from bringing somebody in who doesn't really know anything about Scottish football or the Scottish League.
Well, I mean, I suppose...
knowing the Scottish League doesn't matter too much, but you still going to have to know it a bit, because you're still going to have to bring in players from it to supplement the squad, because we don't have a squad full of guys who are all EPL level.
No, we don't. And, well, first of all, that huge replacement with that is I don't think it's the reason to keep Clarke. There is a cautionary tale with Ireland at the moment, because they also had Stephen Kenny, who was not really equivalent to Clarke. He's like, he was an ideologue, sort of wanted Ireland to play passing football and stuff, and it was a complete disaster. He just we know from his time at Dunfermline, he's not very good.
And that is a potential problem. Like, people want like attacking football. I think if we got in a coach who's like, okay, right, I'm going to get Scotland playing attacking football, I think we'd be fucking crap, and we get murdered all the time.
There's no need we don't need to go gung ho. But anyway, so they sacked him because they've been rubbish for the last few years, and they haven't been able to appoint anybody. So and they might end up getting it to John O'Shea, just because he's like the caretaker at the moment, because they're just they can't find anyone else to take it. But I think we're in a better place than they are at the moment. So I would think that if we were, I'm just pulling it because a name that's been mentioned in the association with Ireland job, Willie Sagnol, for example, the Georgia manager. They've been great at this tournament. You could appoint him. We could pay more than Georgia can. Albeit I saw there's some billionaire Georgian billionaires giving all the Georgian players like £1 million or something. So maybe we can't pay the same as Georgia can. But you would think the SFA should be able to pay more than the Georgian FA. Are you
playing with a pen?
I have a wee clip.
Right, put that down.
Sorry. But yeah, so there's... But ultimately, I don't think you shouldn't just keep a manager just because you think there's nobody else better. There are better managers than Steve Clarke. There's 23 better managers than Steve Clarke at the tournament. I'm not advocating appointing Gareth Southgate, but I think he will be a loose end pretty soon. But I wouldn't appoint him. But there are plenty of managers I think that you could get in that would take the job and would be an improvement and wouldn't cost as much as David Moyes.
All right, so let me go back then, because it's something you said earlier. Because you're right in the sense that you shouldn't just get rid of you shouldn't just keep a manager because you're like, oh, well, who else are we going to get? Because that is the kind of job to invite the applications, to go scouring, to see if you can find somebody. Again, I'm not sure I trust the SFA to do any of this, but and that is an issue. But it's the fact that, I don't normally, when people say that, and it's kind of a situation that's untenable, and there's people who just want to be contrarians, or just kind of believe in the old age when you held on to managers for ridiculous lengths of time and just say, oh, well, who else are you going to get? I think that is a useless argument. The reason why I use it in this sense is because I just don't think, and this is where we would disagree, I just don't think that Clarke has done that bad a job to say, like, right, we need to find somebody else. You say you have struggled for 2 tournaments, but we have reached 2 tournaments. Now, the first one, fairly easy enough to reach, it has to be said. Mm-hmm. But then we have improved since then. In the last 2 qualification campaigns, we finished above, yes, I know, the Ukraine game was a massive letdown, and that is an arse-stick to beat Clarke with. Not denying that. But we did overperform that campaign overall. We were the 3rd seed, and we finished 2nd. And that helped us, that improvement. We then did get... We could put in the mitigating factors about the Spain playing a shit team, and because it was the first game. Norway. The Norway game I'd like to go against as well, because we were rubbish for a lot of it, but we also really limited a team with Erling Haaland and Martin Odegaard in it to very few chances, which kept us in the game and allowed us to steal it later on. It's not like Norway missed loads of chances in that game. We were just very fortunate. We gave ourselves a chance by staying defensively resolute. In the Hampden game, but at the same time, it was still terrible weather. I know that we get a lot of rain in Scotland, but we never usually get rain like that. It was still the same conditions for both teams, and the Scotland players were like, right, no, let's just fucking play, and that shows a bit stronger mentality than the Georgians had. And it was, overall, a tough group. It was a tough qualification group, and we navigated it surprisingly easily. And so...
Yes.
I do think, like, if you look at the piece overall, and then you look at the last couple of Nations League campaigns as well, where we finished top of our group, and the last one got into the top seed. We also, in the previous one, were unlucky not to get out of it when we were going up against Slovakia and the Czech Republic, and we got some decent results out of that campaign as well. I think over the course, yes, the 2 Euros have been bad, but over the whole body of work, since he's come in especially, that Clarke has been doing a good job, and that's why I do think, and yeah, terrible for 2 tournaments. The thing is, it's 6 games. It's not a huge sample size, and yes, he has shat it both times. And if we do go into another tournament and we do it again, and I know people want progression from one to the next, you want to go, okay, the lessons learned for the first one, make the second one better. Again, 1 and 2, not a huge sample size here. If he gets to the third one and plays the exact same style of football, then I would be saying, right, I think that's enough, right? The man has set us up on a great path. We're now a team that just qualifies for tournaments. We're a Scotland team of old now. We get to tournaments and we shit it in the group stages and go home early. So now we need somebody to take us on. I think the dream, well, the plan, the goal was to get Scotland qualifying for tournaments after tournaments, and for it to be like it was before, for it to be normal that we are there. It's not quite there yet for me, and I think if Clarke is the man who's proven that he can get us to tournaments and get us close to them, get us to a playoff, get us to a tournament, get us to a tournament, get us to a playoff, get us to a tournament, if that kind of trend continues, then I'm happy with that, because that is the building blocks that we put in place. If we're trying to run before we can properly walk, then we'll just end up falling flat on our face. And that is my main worry. It's what's going to happen if we do get rid of Clarke and bring in somebody else.
I think we've got a pretty good floor now. Albeit we're on it. In terms of, we've got a lot of good players. It's not how you build a squad at club level, because we've got too many of the same types, but we've got a good solid squad. We don't really have enough young players coming through, which is maybe come on to, and that's not Clarke's fault. But I suppose my argument would be, partly because of the work that Clarke's done, but also because the squad's just got better under his tenure. We are probably going to be like second seeds in a group now. So the risk factor, I don't think thinking about it like at a club level of, well, we don't want to change, like Hibs when they sat Jack Ross, for example, right? It's not the same scenario, because we're not going to get relegated. I mean, we might get relegated from our Nations League group, but I think that's going to happen anyway. And it's probably for our benefit, because we're probably more likely to get a decent playoff spot in Group B, I think. But there's not really that same risk, because we're not going to qualify for the World Cup as it stands. I'm sorry, we're not. It's just, we're not going to do that under Steve Clarke, because we'll have to play a playoff against a good team, and we've seen what happens when we play good teams in games that really matter. Like so live or die games. So that's not going to happen. I mean, if we look back to the World Cup campaign, who was the team that we beat to finish second? Austria. Have Austria had any players come through that've improved? They're any a Austrian wonder kid is the reason why they're the hot ticket this Euros? No. What they've done is they've appointed a manager who's changed the way they play massively, and that has led to really good results for Austria. And they're the dark horses now. We'll see how they go on in the knockout stage, obviously, but they've really improved, basically because they made a change in the dugout. They had a useless manager who was the manager of the last Euros. It was really disappointing, and then they sacked him, despite getting out of the group, I believe. And they sacked him. They've appointed Ragnick, and they've really kicked on. That to me is what we need to do. This team doesn't actually have that much life left in it. It was the oldest team at the Euros. We don't have another McTominay, McGinn, Tierney, Robertson level of players coming through, but they aren't there. So we've probably got one campaign left with this team, I would say. One qualification campaign before people will really start to, I mean, the way Robertson was talking after the game against Hungary, he sort of alluded to the fact that some players might be retiring. We'll have to see if that's the case, but I think maybe one or two will. After the next World Cup campaign, I think more will. So, because they'll all be the wrong side of 30 at that point. So this is it for this team now. We can either let Clarke go down with the ship and not qualify for the World Cup and then leave at that stage, and then a new manager comes in, having to qualify, basically having to familiarise himself with a whole squad and the job in the middle of a Euros campaign, which really, Euros qualifications should be the minimum. That should be a sacking offence. If you don't qualify for the Euros, you should be sacked as Scotland manager. In the World Cup's sort of more of a free hit, is the way I see it, because it's obviously it's harder to get through. I think we're approaching it the wrong way. If we give Clarke this World Cup campaign and it's unsuccessful, then we're in the position where we're having to appoint a new manager and he's having to familiarise himself with the job in the midst of a campaign which we really can't fuck up, because we really have to be the next Euros because we're hosting it. So that's where I come from. How long is Steve Clarke going to be the Scotland manager for? He's already been 5 years. Is he going to be 10 years in the job? He's already looks pretty past it to me. In terms of tactically, he's not a modern. Whatever you think about Steve Clarke, he's not a modern manager. His touchstones, and the guys he's worked with, they're dinosaurs now. Like Mourinho, like he's from that. He's from that school. He's not a modern coach. He's not surrounding himself with good modern coaches, and apart from Austin McPhee, and pieces were fucking rubbish in the last tournament. But apart from McPhee, it's like he's got Morrison, who's not had the job in club football as far as I'm aware, and certainly not at first team level, and John Carver. So he's not. Where the ideas there? There's no fresh ideas. It's just it'll be just tweaks around the edges and the same basic system. Now, if we think this team, which will be as it stands, it's hard to see how this collection of players with the age they're at get better playing the same way in the next 2 years towards the World Cup. I don't see that. I just don't see how you get from these guys sort of, they were 27, 28, 29, 2 years on, playing at the level they're playing at, the intensity they're playing at. They're already, a few of them are sort of starting to break down. I don't see how you get there without a fairly radical change in approach. And that's not going to come from Steve Clarke. It's just not. We know that there might be changes around the edges, but ultimately, I think there needs to be a whole new tactical approach now. It's been great going to 2 tournaments. It's been much better than not being at these tournaments, despite how badly they've gone. But I don't think this can be the way you were describing it. You were just getting to a tournament. That's enough. It's like, well, is it?
It's enough. My argument was it's enough for now.
Yeah, but is it enough for? How? So we give him the next 4 years to the next tournament. Is that? Do we make the change then? So he'd been in the job 9 years.
But if the team is still responding, I don't care how long he's in the job. If his team is still performing on the park, what does that matter?
But is it though? It's not now. So it's.
But that's the point. If he's, I still believe. I think we'll see. I get your point that it might be too late to make a change, but I don't know, if we do start the next campaign badly, then I think that's what you do. You change it halfway through, so you give the next manager a bit of a run up. You don't just do it. I think that is enough time to give a new boss time to get in, to get his feet under the table, because it'll not just be that, there'll also be Nations League stuff in between the World Cup and the Euros.
There will be, which I don't think will go very well.
And I'm not entirely. I know you say that Clarke is, but in terms of playoff games that he's managed, he's won 1, drawn 1, and lost 1. Well, it's actually suppose he's drawn 2, if I want to put it that way.
Drawn 3.
Yeah.
No, drawn 2. Yeah, drawn 2 and lost 1.
Drawn 2 and lost 1. Yeah. Or you can say he's won 2 and lost 1. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that he's definitely going to shit it next time. I think that Ukraine one was. I think we were also, and again, this would be showing the hypocrite that I'm going back to what I said earlier. I don't like using this, but if it helps me with my own argument, that Ukraine game, if you do want to apply those caveats that you're applying to other games, you have to apply the Ukraine game that we were playing that a lot later. We were playing it after the season had finished, whereas everybody else was doing it in March, and that we were in better form in March. That kind of threw us off our stride. There was a very weird atmosphere at Hampden that day that didn't really help the team either. There are kind of, if you want to throw in mitigating factors, that is one that should probably be applied to that game.
We did get played off the park by a team that isn't very good, ultimately.
No.
So that wasn't great. I mean, we got battered that day. So I think it is what it comes down to really. Ultimately, it's like, do we think the Clarke approach is the best approach now? I think, and I remember listening to the preview you did with Tony before the Germany game. You were actually saying that you didn't think Gilmore would play. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you don't agree with it, but you just think that's what Clarke will do.
Yeah.
And I think, and you were right. I couldn't believe it at the time, but you were right. And I was very much like Tony, like, what do you mean Gilmore wouldn't play? So I think there's too many decisions now that are being made, and you sort of internally justify them in your head with, well, that's what Clarke will do. And it's the same with playing McKenna left centre half at the in the Hungary game. It's like, that's what Clarke will do. So there's no point in really thinking about what we should do. It's just like, well, that's what he'll do. And you put too many limitations on yourself of what we can achieve, because it's like, well, obviously Clarke won't do that. And it's the same with, I mean, I still believe this. It wasn't just lashing out after the game. And it's obviously a massive cause celebrity, and it's the most annoying people in Scottish football Twitter. Obviously, always talk about it, but Ryan Gold.
No. I'm calling this podcast an end. You've lost it. You've lost it now.
No, because you can say what you like about Ryan Gold, right? And the level he's playing at, and I think it's valid. I mean, we did concede a goal to a guy playing at the same level and playing much worse, incidentally, during the tournament. But the issue is we don't actually have any. And Clarke says, he basically said before the tournament, he wasn't in the squad because we've got too many other players like him in the squad already playing at a higher level than he is. That's bollocks. We don't have anyone like Ryan Gold, because Christie and Armstrong and McGinn and McTominay, while they may play in similar areas of the pitch, they're completely different types of players. Completely different.
But Christie, like, this is the pushback I make on that. Christie at a Scottish Premiership level is right. So it's hard to say, because I've not seen Ryan Gold playing a Scottish Premiership level since he was at Hibs, when he didn't look very good.
Yeah, no.
And then
that was a long time ago.
And he had his rise. Right, but his rise wasn't that long after that, was it not? About 3 years later?
He played. I think he played like a year then in the second tier in Portugal, and then a really good season in the top tier.
But if we're right, so it's just hard to tell, because people just assume this Portuguese league's much better than Scottish Premiership. I don't think so. I think it is a better league, but I don't think there's as much in it as people would say. And I think because people look at the teams like Porto and Sporting and the kind of other ones at the top that do better than Celtic and Rangers, but they shouldn't necessarily do as much better as Celtic and Rangers to do. That's kind of, I think a lot of that is Celtic and Rangers underperforming in Europe, which is something we've spoken about lots on the podcast. And I think to get to the kind of lower levels, I think it's a similar league to the Scottish Premiership, in that there's different levels of team within that. So it's a hard league to judge. If he was doing it for Benfica, or if he was doing it for Sporting or whatever, then yeah, absolutely. Why are you not playing fucking Ryan Gold, kind of thing? But then he goes to the MLS, which is just not a good standard league. And if you're taking Ryan Gold and you're taking Ryan Christie and you're putting them both in a Scottish Premiership team, would Ryan Gold be more creative than Ryan Christie? Possibly, but I don't think there'd be that much of a difference. And it's just that those skills, like creativity, when you get to a higher level, they're just not there, because you don't have the ability to thread those passes, because the space is narrower, the players are quicker, you don't have the abilities to do it, and therefore you have to fall back on something. Christie falls back on the fact he works like fuck. What does Ryan Gold have to fall back on if he gets to that level and he just can't do what he does at the MLS level? That's why I would say that it's not just a case of getting Gold, put him in the team and going, okay, now we've got a proper number 10 who can play through balls.
Oh no, I don't think it's that simple either, but I would have tried it at some point in the last 5 years. And there really is not a cogent argument to why he hasn't done that. That is stubbornness at this stage. And he's not going to, and that's again is one of these things that Clarke's just not going to do. He's obviously, I mean, I don't know if there's been a fallout, but it would appear that that's just not going to change. And Gold's probably more likely to play for Canada now than he is for Scotland. Now, I'm not saying that Gold is the answer, but I do think he's the best player we have of his type. And that isn't as that, that's not great, and he might play and be absolutely rubbish. But I would have tried it because who else do we have? I mean, we took 8 players to the tournament that didn't kick a ball anyway. So like we're taking guys like Ryan Jack, who's miles off the level now, and because he's the only defensive midfielder we've got. So why not take someone like Ryan Gold, who might be, or he might, his level might carry to that. It probably won't, but he's still a sort of classic number 10 in the way that we just don't have. Bringing on guys like Armstrong. I mean, Armstrong's obviously a championship player now. He's a runner. That's sort of going a bit because he's the wrong side of 30. I mean, I think there could have been a space for a Gold. People were sort of saying, "Oh, why did he not play James Forrest and things like that?" It's like, I mean, James Forrest again is past it and had a wee purple patch to the end of the Scottish season.
The more question should be, why did he actually bring Forrest in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. And I think he played Forrest against Gibraltar and realised his mistake, and that's why Lewis Morgan got hauled up in the first place. Because I think he realised that Forrest wasn't at the level he thought he was. And maybe Forrest would have dropped out if Doak had been hadn't got injured. But it's just, yes, we do have too many of the similar players. I'm not saying like drop Ryan Christie from the squad. Like, I think that'd be ridiculous. Ryan Christie has a place in the Scotland squad. Of course he does. It's just we have limited our options in that area of the park because Clarke has an idea of what players are. It's the same with taking McGinn off, instead of like Callum McGregor within the game, because I think Clarke has put players in boxes. He would never bring Ryan Christie on to play centre mid, even though that's where he plays at club level. It seems like he would never pull McGinn back into the midfield because he thinks of McGinn as an attacking midfielder. So he has to play Callum McGregor and Gilmore beside him. To me, Clarke's thinking is sort of in a bit of a straitjacket, and it led to so many weird subs that made sense at an individual level. That obviously the team that ended that game against Hungary was a complete riot. I mean, it was players playing all over the place in completely wrong positions because he didn't think of the starting 11 as flexible as I think it probably is. So yeah, it's to me, that's the Hungary game sums it all up to me as to why we need a change. There's, Clarke it was a squad of Clarke's making. There's not that many changes he could make to it, but there are some. But it's more the approach. The same players could be arranged in a different way,
yeah.
And I think it would be. I think we could be more successful.
Yeah, okay. I think we've circled back around with what we were saying earlier, so that's probably a good time to call it a day. I was thinking going into this, will we do 20? No, we did 45.
No. Yes. As ever. But yeah. It's I'm always like, I feel bad about, or I feel reluctant to criticise Steve Clarke because people just think the Rangers fans don't like him. And that always gets brought up basically as soon as anyone from Rangers persuasion criticise Steve Clarke, and there's nothing to do with it for me. I mean, the Rangers player he did pick for the squad, he shouldn't have, in my opinion. It's nothing to do with that. I just don't think he is as good a manager as sometimes the Scotland squad has actually made him look. And he's got a lot of credit, and he deserves some of it, but. To me, I think he is one of the weak elements of this Scotland national team at the moment, and it should change.
Right, well, I disagree, but we've been over this. Right.
Indeed.
That'll do us. Euan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Craig.
As I said earlier, there is still going to be some content going up on the main feed. There is still 2 of the top 12 player lists. So there is still attacking midfielders and strikers to go up. There is also a couple of specials to go up. That'll all be going up in the next fortnight, I would say. And then there will be a break on the main feed for a couple of weeks before we come back with our previews for the start of the next season. But if you don't want any interruptions at all in terms of Scottish football coverage, then you need to subscribe to our Patreon. patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, where there will certainly be some more topical stuff next week, and actually hopefully for the weeks after as well, because Craig Cairns did say that he'd be willing to put some things, to do some podcasts and upload them kind of the same day in my absence, while I take a break and go on holiday at some point to somewhere and just lie. Don't know where yet. Going to go to travel agents later today and basically say £500 each, half board, all inclusive, whatever. Just what's your best deal? Anywhere, fly anywhere within 5 hours, and just do that for a week and do fuck all. I might not even take my phone. Or deleting WhatsApp off it and then reinstalling it again.
So basically, what you're saying is, having just come back from a holiday, you need a holiday to recover from.
That was not a holiday.
No. It sounded like hard work, I have to say. Yeah.
I was done after the Switzerland game. I wanted to go home. I really didn't want to be in Germany anymore. I only went out properly once after that. It was a lot of sitting around in a hotel going, I can't be bothered drinking anymore. I don't want to really spend. If I'm not enjoying it, what's the point in spending money? I'm going mental here because I'm just in a fucking studio Airbnb flat.
Yeah,
I did go for a meal myself one night. That was nice and relaxing.
Good.
But
okay.
even then, I was writing a column while I was there. So yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. I'm talking about a proper holiday where it's literally nothing. Off. No Scottish football. Just don't even look at the Terrace group chat. I'm thoroughly looking forward to that. Anyway, but yeah, if you want to continue hearing from the guys while I'm taking that break, then yes, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. The lowest tier costs you only £2 per month. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. Euan, thank you very much for joining me once again.
Thank you, Craig.
And thank you to everybody for watching and listening. And yes, we'll be back soon enough. Goodbye.